Hey everyone, and welcome. You're listening to the next episode of Turn Zero Drive Home. This is a solo Marvel Snap podcast where I talk about all the latest info you need before you start the first turn of a game while I drive home from work. I'm your host, August, and let's drive home. Okay, so this week's episode is going to be my snappy review of the new Origins of Apocalypse season. This season is the one that's going to be starting next week in March. We've got about, I think it's 9 new cards to talk about. It's a 5-week season, so there's one more card than we would normally have. Usually, this is content that I do as an article for Snap.fan. If you're familiar with my content, you've seen that pretty much monthly for the last year now, I believe. But if you haven't heard, Snap.fan is unfortunately closing their content articles. They're still keeping up with data mines and keeping up as a website as a big Snap database. We won't be doing articles anymore. So this frees me up to do this here as a video for you guys. This will allow me to kind of, talk out my thoughts a little bit more. But you'll still get the same kind of star rating quality that you're used to from me. Okay, so let's go on to the cards. We're going to start off with our Season Pass card, En Sabah Nur. He is a 4/5 with Objective. Objective, have a full front row at each location, and when you do that, you then transform into Apocalypse Celestial Chosen. So let me pause here for a second. Objective has definitely been on a lot of people's minds if you've been looking at data mines. If you haven't, then you're going to find out we got a brand new keyword coming up, right? So it's Objective. I did a whole article on this last week. It was my last one for Snap.fan. Go check it out. It's basically me breaking down everything we know about how the keyword works as we've data mined it. Essentially, what it is that at the end of your turn, or actually after the end of your turn, the objective card will check to see whether you fulfilled the condition, and if it has, it will perform its reward. That's essentially how it works. So with En Sabah Nur here, what it's doing is it's checking after the end of turn, do you have a full front row at each location? So each 1, 2, 3, left, middle, right. If each of those locations has 2 cards in the front, then it'll trigger the objective reward, which is to transform into Apocalypse Celestial Chosen, which is a 4/8 with an on reveal. Swap the lowest power card in your front row at any location with a card from your deck. Okay, so let's try to let's break this down a little bit. So this is a Season Pass card. I do not believe it is on the same level as the last 2 that we were just received. So if you look at, Shao the Undying, and then you look at Star-Lord, Master of the Sun, those 2 have been very polarizing to the community, very strong cards, definitely warping the metagame around them. I do not believe we'll see that with this guy here. The objective is not that hard to accomplish. That's not the issue, I think. I think the issue is the payoff. You're just going to get a 4/8 that kind of has this sort of pseudo-blink effect. So by removing your lowest power card, you're going to get something out of your deck. It doesn't even necessarily target anything. Like when you think of cards like Blink, it specifically brings out a card with higher cost than the thing that you push back in the deck. This guy is, sure, it's taking your lowest card, so that part is targeted, but the output isn't. So who knows what you're going to get out of this, right? You could even have a weird situation where you throw your lowest power card back in your deck, and then it spits out a card with even less power, right? Just depending on what your deck construction is like. Things I like this with the hood. Of course, this is another way to get rid of the hood, but still, have that value of having a demon. I like this with things that can fill the board pretty full, like the Sam Wilson Batroc move package that's been going around that's kind of fitting in a lot of things. That deck has a very easy way of filling up the front row, right? So if you time it for your last turn, because again, so objective checks every turn, but it only fulfills it if it's completed, right? So if you're careful with how you're moving things around, you can keep it so that your front row in one of your areas is not full. And then, you can move a shield into an location, and then that location, since you don't need the shield anymore on, say, turn 6, it'll then swap out into another card, right? there's some interesting like tricks you can do there. But, you know, all in all, I'm not really sure where this guy's going to end up and like what kind of competitive deck that we're thinking of right now in the metagame. There's a lot of cute little tricks you can do. Like, again, like I'm thinking of that stuff. I'm thinking of Mysterio. Mysterio is going to be on my mind a lot today, as you'll see as we go through the rest of these cards. But if Mysterio is one of those things that fills up your front row, then you can swap out one of the illusions for an actual card. Mind you, at this point, Apocalypse won't be able to see which Mysterio is the real one. They all have 0 power, so you can actually swap out the 4 power one and then pop in another card, and then the other 2 just reveal to have 0 power. That's not good either. Basically what I'm trying to get down here is that I'm not seeing a way to really abuse this on reveal. When you're thinking of Marvel Snap cards right now, you're trying to think of like, how do I push this guy to the absolute limit? Like, what is it that I can do to take what he's already offering and really accelerate it? And I can't really see much there. So for that reason, I'm going to give Apocalypse I believe I'm going to go with a 4-star card. So my ratings are going to be out of 10 stars, and I'm giving him 4. Like, I don't think he's like a really bad card. He's going to have some very good uses. He's going to surprise swing some lanes in your favor, but I just don't really feel like I have like a home dedicated to him in mind. Next up is a card I'm a lot more excited for. It is Iska the Unbeaten. So Iska the Unbeaten is our super premium pass card. This is the card that you get when you buy the extra addition to the season pass. It's a 4/3, end of turn. If you're losing this location, double this card's power. All right, so let's do some quick maths, okay? So you play this on turn 4 in a location you're losing. She becomes a 4/6, right? Goes from 3 to 6. You then, let's say, losing, that's on turn 4. Turn 5, you're losing that location again. It jumps up from 4/6 to 4/12. Now, you're either winning this location now because you have a 4/12 there, or you're still losing it. If you're still losing it, it's going to become a 4/24 at the end of turn 6. If you are winning it, your opponent then has to decide, okay, how much power can I afford to put here? Because if I take control of this location, I'm going to flip it to 24, right? So you see how essentially on turn 5, you're basically challenging this location with 24 power just from playing Iska in a location you were losing on turn 4. That's really, really big, okay? So most 4-cost cards, when you play them, represent about 10 to 15 power, give or take, right? And a lot of them come with downsides, right? You think of things like Typhoid Mary, think of things like Cull Obsidian that has a restriction on how you can play it, right? They're not trying to give you ways to play 4/10s, and this is like an effective 4/24 just from playing it in a location you're losing on turn 4. Like, that's crazy to me. This card is going to be, I think, one of the things that gets people upset, right? Like, if we're thinking of the community sentiment right now, and we're thinking about how the community is looking at, season pass cards being overpowered, this one is not helping the argument, okay? So what can we do with this? We can do, Invisible in first steps because it's an end of turn card. You can give it a second trigger, make it a 48. My thought when I was thinking about this card earlier was Zola. We've been seeing a lot of Zola lately with Star-Lord. But now let's think about Zola here. If you can take that 4/12 that you have on turn 5 and then Zola it and put 2 in 2 different locations and you were losing those ones, you suddenly have 4/24s in both spots there, right? That's alongside whatever cards you were playing there earlier in the game. I think that's interesting. I think Iska's biggest counter is going to be stuff like, Shadow King, just reducing it right back down to its regular 3. When you're at the last turn. Iska's very face up on the board, right? You got to play it early to get that ball rolling, but once you do, it's going to be huge power, right? It's the kind of thing that can get countered semi-easily because, it's there. It's not the kind of thing you can drop on turn 6 and expect it to win a lane for you unless you do have other synergies going on. Stuff that I can just think of off the top of my head would be like hand buff or deck buff synergies. So maybe this card ends up as like a plan B in those zombie Galacti decks. That could be an interesting move for this. But other than that, like, I think this could be the kind of thing that brings Invisible Woman First Steps and a turn decks back into prevalence, right? They have not had a lot of like time in the sun recently because of how multiplicative all the other decks have been. All decks right now are basically about how can I make my combo big, right? And end of turn decks do have a combo, but they kind of come a little short on the numbers. Like when you compare it to something like Man Spider or something like Fing Fang Foom, right? You're looking at a card that doesn't really keep up when you just look at your Havoc and your Sunspots, right? But Iska represents a card that does keep up with this kind of new power threshold. That's why I'm thinking she's going to be like a 8 or 9 star card. I'm really thinking that this card is going to be like the one to watch for the month. Next up is Juggernaut, Horseman of War. Juggernaut is a 2/2 objective, have 6 different powers among your other cards in play, and then it gives you +6 power to Juggernaut. So as long as your board has at least 6 other cards with, different powers, so like 0 here, a 4 here, a 3 here, whatever, then Juggernaut will get +6 power. So Juggernaut will then become a 2/8. This is not a very flashy ability. It's pretty basic for this kind of type of card, but it's power, right? And it's power at a low cost. So you can effectively, if you're building your deck for it, and if you're taking advantage of your locations and other synergies or whatnot, this could represent a 2/8. We've seen a lot of different kind of 2 scalers be key pieces in decks. These are the things that help, shore up the early game with some more late game presence. Mid-range decks kind of take advantage of this kind of thing, where you see low impact cards at the beginning of the game become higher impact alongside tech cards to take down what your opponent is doing. That strategy still exists, but it's long from when it used to be like the meta tyrant, right? When tech cards used to be the big bads of everything, right? I'm interested in Juggernaut actually trying him out in that like Batroc Sam Wilson kind of deck, which I know seems strange because it's like no move synergy whatsoever, but the thing that that kind of the Batroc move decks kind of do have going for them is they have a lot of cards that are cheaply played that have a lot of different power, right? You look at Silk, 5 there. Look at Sam, he's a 2 and makes a 0. Look at Batroc, he's a 2 that grows, so he can be a 4. That's different from your cards. Craven is a 3, right? Like these cards. Oh, actually, sorry, I said Sam was a 2. Sam's also a 3, but still, these are cards that also change their power as you move them around. Hydra Stomper can be whatever, right? Miles is a 6. You're naturally playing a bunch of different cards with different powers, and you have ways to manipulate them with the shield, right? You can move them around to grow and gain power when you need it, so that when you play Juggernaut, it can get that +8, right? It's another small scaler. I'm right now playing this deck with Drax, Avatar of Life, and I'm really liking it, right? Because what Drax represents is sort of like a second copy of Hydra Stomper, where Hydra Stomper is our big, like, here's our 3 cost that has 10 plus power on it. And then Drax sort of represents something similar. It comes to be like a 3/7, sometimes a 3/10, right? Hydra Stomper more often is bigger, but it does a nice impression. And I'm wondering if Juggernaut can do a similar thing, where instead of Drax, you play Juggernaut, so you have a card that costs 2 instead of 3, which can be awkward sometimes. It costs a little less power, but still like 8, right? Like 8 is still a pretty respectable number. I'm curious if it lives there. Other than that, I'm not really sure where to put it, so I'm going to give Juggernaut a 6. I think 6 out of 10, pretty appropriate for Juggernaut here. This one is probably the one I'm most cautious of, and you'll see why in a second. So this is Gambit. Gambit, Horseman of Death. 3/3, objective, play 5 total cost of created cards, and then you randomly destroy up to 4 total cost of enemy cards. All right, so You heard me right. This is a new Gambit, right? So we already have a Gambit in the game, and that's a polarizing card for a lot of people because it destroys something on your opponent's side, right? A lot of people, generally, you don't like cards on your side of the board being blown up. So when people take advantage of that, with like Wong and doubling, and you get like lots of Gambit triggers blowing up your board, not fun. Now we have a card that does that in another different way, right? You're going to be blowing up multiple cards on your opponent's side, as long as they, caps at 4, right? So it's like, oh, we'll kill a 1 here and a 3 here, or we'll pop that 4, or, 2 2s, like, that kind of thing, right? It's random. It'll fill up to 4 and then stop, right? It's not going to kill. It's not going to blow up a 3 and then blow up a 2, right? It's not going to go to 5 just because it was almost 4. No, it's got to stop at 4. The objective, I think they think it's too hard to do, and I'm not sure it is. So if you'll remember in the data mines, this used to say 6. This used to say you had to have a total of 6 cost of created cards played, right? Now it says 5. So I'm thinking in their testing, they weren't getting 6 as often as they thought they would. I'm not sure why that would be, because I think it's going to be really easy to do. First off, let's talk about Mysterio. Mysterio, when you play him, you play it from your hand, and it becomes 3 different created cards, all with 2 costs, right? They're still Mysterio, so they're 2 4s, but they're hidden as illusions as 2 0s, right? So you have 3 created cards. Right away, you play turn 5, turn 6, you can play Gambit, and then Mysterio. Mysterio will count as all the created cards you need for Gambit's trigger. Bang, 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 there you go. What I'm not sure of if it's going to work, right? Because we've had a data miner check, and the game just kind of crashes when you do that. So, which is a weird response, because that's not usually something that would happen when they're, data mining these abilities. So who knows what's going on there. But even if we're taking Mysterio out of the equation, we have cards like Valentina, Iron Patriot that give you high cost cards and then self-reduce them. So like you have something like Valentina who gives you a 6 cost card but makes it only cost 4. That means when you play it on board, it's still a 6 cost card. So it will fulfill Gambit's objective all by itself. That's the kind of stuff that worries me about Gambit. And so it's easy to do, and it'll destroy a bunch of cards. And now the part that's really scary is, what if you just copy Gambit a whole bunch, right? Like, what if I'm playing Frigga or Prodigy, right? Frigga is great because the new Gambit that you copy will satisfy the condition, right? It'll be 3 out of 5 cost. Prodigy just means you have like another one to trigger off of, right? You throw in something like Moon Girl in there to double them up in your hands, play a bunch of them. Like, I'm seeing a world here where you're playing maybe 3 different Gambit abilities and watching your opponent's board completely disappear, aside from 5 and 6 cost cards. How many of those are your opponents going to be able to play, right? Let's think of what's going on right now. So we've got the ramp deck. So the ramp deck usually brings out, something on 5, something on 6, and maybe something on 4 if their game plan's going rightly. So they got 3 cards to play against all your stuff, right? We think of Star-Lord decks. Hopefully we don't have to think of those for long, but let's think about them, right? Star-Lord wants to play himself on 4, double him on 5, and then play a couple big things on 6. The problem with Star-Lord is that he is a 4 cost himself. So all this power that you're getting from all that energy, doubling him up, doing him again, let's say Zola, they're all going to get blown up by Gambit. So you're really only leaving your opponent with what they played on 6. This is the kind of thing that can take over and be a problem. I'm thinking he's like an 8-star card, and I'm worried that might be a little conservative. I feel like we might end up seeing this be a metagame tyrant. And if we do, hopefully it gets addressed sooner than like the Star-Lord stuff got addressed, right? Our first Series 4 card of the month, it's going to be Sandstorm. We get this from Team Clash. It's a 2-cost skill. On reveal, add 2 rocks to your hand. Give them +1 power for each of your front row characters. So I really like this one. I think that the rock stuff that we're seeing, there's this and another card coming up. I think that they're going to be a lot of fun, especially when the support is this good. So your front row will consist of like all 3 locations, right? So that's a potential of this being plus 6 power on 2 rocks. So that's essentially being Sandstorm is a 2-cost skill that gives you 2 demons to your hand, basically. It will not always be 6. Of course, you're not always going to be able to play this when you have a full lineup here. Notably, Sandstorm itself could be like one of the cards in the front row, and it would still count because it hasn't, yet banished from the board due to its own ability. I could see this being like a moderate, you play this on a later turn to give yourself like some edge over like the final turn. So you could have 2 1/5s, 2 1/4s into your hand. They're created into your hand, so Victoria hand will buff them. So if you're playing this kind of deck, I think that it might kind of fit in there. This rock stuff kind of overlaps with the ongoing buffs that Victoria hand gives. So I wouldn't be surprised if there's some sort of deck there that takes advantage of both of them. It's a neat little card. I would give this maybe like a 6 or a 7. Like, I'm pretty high on it. Like, I think that this card is going to see play for sure. Skills like this are good because of what they give you back, right? Like, if this costs 3, then that'd be too much because you're only getting back 2 costs of like 1 cost in your hand. But since it costs 2, you're not really losing much. It's just kind of like a tempo thing on like which turn you play it. I'm very into this. Caliban, Horseman of Pestilence, 3/4 objective. Have 3 cards that are 4 cost or higher in play. Afflict the highest cost enemy card with -7 power. So this feels like a ramp sort of card, because if you play this and then have a bunch of turns to then play some 5s and 6s, you're going to be able to take advantage of the -7 that this gives. So that makes him sort of like a 3/11, which is pretty big, right? Like, when we think of 3s, where the biggest 3, I believe, at the moment is like, Starbrand is just a 3/10, but it has that negative ability of giving your opponents +3 at other locations. Cassandra Nova is not as big as it used to be. Sage is not really played as much as it used to be either. So if you're looking at like the 3-cost slot for like the big number guy, that's going to be Caliban. This could be like a weird Star-Lord card even, because if you're going to be playing Star-Lord on 4, or even if you're doing like Star-Lord on 5, Caliban can sneak in on turn 4 too. Like, this is like a strange one. It's also something that can be played after, right? Like, you can play this on turn 6. So if you're doing Star-Lord shenanigans and you have 20 energy on turn 6, you can play Caliban, and it'll see your multiple Star-Lord cards, your Absmans, your whatever 6 costs you're playing, and hit that -7 off. So I can see this being used in decks. I can see this being a thing. It also doesn't really specify or care about whether the card is created or if it's something from your own deck or whatever. So this could be like an Arishem card. You can get this down early and then use the extra energy you have with Arishem to play more guys and make this work. You can, with locations, stuff that copy like Sinister London. If you Sinister London this, then you'll have multiple copies of it for later, and then like all your big stuff will count for 2, right? So I could see some fun happening here. Afflict decks themselves, we haven't seen those in like a while, but stuff with Ajax, Hazmat, that Man Thing, that kind of stuff, they're playing a lot of, like, a good number of cards that are over 4. So this could just be another card that slots in there to really hammer home a lane. If you think about the biggest lane that your opponent's going to have, and if there's like a Diamondback in there, and then you hit with that -7, then they're going to actually be getting a lot lower, or something with like US Agent, and then hit them with the -7 from Caliban. Like, this is something that's really going to flip locations for you, right? I don't know if it's exactly like meta game worthy. Like, it all depends on how easy it is to replicate this. It's a lot like Omega Sentinel, right? Like, Omega Sentinel is basically the activate version of this. This is the objective. And Omega Sentinel has like built-in synergies with Jocasta and stuff, right? Because it's right there. You can automatically double it up that way. This one takes a little bit of work if you want to double it up. So I'm not too sure which is actually going to end up better. this does cost 3 as opposed to 4. Like there's a lot of different ifs and ands, right? And it's not like Omega Sentinel itself is top of the metagame. So I'm fine giving this like a 5. I think a 5 is pretty good for Caliban. I'd be happy to see it be better because I'm really into these objective cards, right? So we'll see. Next up, Selene, Horseman of Famine. Selene is a 4/4 objective. Have 3 cards with no abilities in play. Steal 5 power from an enemy card here. So she can become a 4/9 herself and then stealing 5 power. So it's an effective 4/14 of stats that we're seeing just from her. 3 cards with no abilities in play is not exactly common. Like there is stuff that you wouldn't think of. Like you're thinking right away when you think no abilities, you're thinking of stuff like Cyclops and Misty Knight or whatever. But people only really play those in High Evolutionary, and since they're in the High Evolutionary deck, they actually have an ability now, so that won't work. Wasp has been seeing some play now recently because of all this Negasonic Warhead everywhere. So Wasp would be one that would count. I'm more leaning towards stuff like Hood Demons and Rocks. I think that's where we're going to see any kind of use for this, because the Rocks themselves have no abilities, Demons have no abilities. So those are the kind of stuff that you're going to want to be using it for. Something like Sandstorm will give you 2 of them right away, right? I know there's talk with this Rocks deck of people thinking about like Rhino to give a free rock or Debris to give yourself 2 free rocks. The Selene is, if she's going to be anywhere, it's going to be in this kind of rock shell. Whether or not that works out or is worth doing, that's a whole other discussion. But that's the only place that I can immediately think of her. I can think of her in Victoria Hand as well, but if maybe she costs less. If she costs like 3 and is looking for 2, then she'd be like really good for that. But since she's looking for 3 cards with like no abilities, I don't think you're going to be able to get there with just Demons in Victoria Hand. So I'm looking at Rocks. And if the Rocks deck needs more power and it needs like a 4/14, then that's where she'll go. Because of that, I'm probably going to give her like a 4 or a 5-star. Like I really like her ability, but I just don't really see where in the meta she's going to play. She could definitely punch up. Like this is the kind of card that's going to like look like a 4-star card, but act like a 7-star. Like you're just going to be like, whoa, this card's amazing every time you pull it off. Releasing in the same week as Selene is another Series 4 card. So this comes from a game mode. This is from High Voltage Overdrive. We have Ozymandias. 5/9 ongoing. Your rocks have +3 power. Simple text, but very enticing in my opinion. I think we've seen time and time again that +3 power is kind of like the borderline of, is this going to be really good or is this going to be ignored? And I think at +3, you have to really look at it a couple times to be sure. This, to me, is most like comparable to Cerebro. So Cerebro decks are all about multiplying this +3 that they give, right? So you want to go across the whole board as much as you can, get everything +3, and then you want to play like Mystique or other copiers to get as many triggers of this +3 as you can. I see Ozymandias working in a similar way, but him being a 5 cost makes that harder. You're basically locked into, if you're going to try and do the Cerebro plan on these rocks, is you're locked into Ozymandias on 5, so that you're free to do Mystique, Chameleon, Prodigy, whatever kind of copiers you got on 6. Which means your rocks need to come out early. I've kind of touched on it a little bit. There are ways to get rocks out, like Rhino, Debris, Sandstorm. That new card is going to be really good for this. I don't think you need to dip into stuff like Mole Man. I know a lot of people are seeing these cards and being excited, like, oh yeah, Mole Man time. But I don't know if you really want to do that, just for the reason that you might accidentally Mole Man away your Ozymandias or other synergy cards that you need to make this work. If you're not trying to do the Mystique copying strategy, I think what you're doing is you're just trying to play for value, right? And in that case, I think, like I was saying earlier, it's like it'd be a kind of interesting fusion with Victoria Hand, Like if you're just looking to play created rocks from your hand, like via Sandstorm, and then have Ozymandias as a secondary backup to your Victoria hand strategies as like a bigger body too, because as a 5'9" himself, he's really providing presence on a location. I can see that working out. So I feel like there's like two ways that you can do this. You either go all in or you try and use him as a backup plan. And I'm not too sure yet which one is going to end up working more. They both seem like very mid-rangey type of strategies to me. And we're not really in a meta game where mid-range is favored. But perhaps that we're going to see a swing back, right? Like if the mid-range can provide like points packages like this, then maybe that's all we needed and we can go back with the tech cards that we're using, right? So I'm going to give him a 7. I'm really into Ozymandias. I think if there's ever going to be a Rocks deck, it's now, and it's because of this guy. If he's the linchpin. If he doesn't work out, then none of it will. And following that is our last card of the season. It is Ramatut. Ramatut is a 4/5 on reveal. Use 3 on reveals from before Ramatut's time. Very fun text. Basically what it rolls down to is that you're going to play him, and then he's going to on reveal active and use 3 random abilities. He's just going to go fire, 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 and you'll see what he does, and it's going to be a fun, chaotic time, right? Is this a viable card, like strategically and competitively? I want to say maybe, right? So there's a couple problems with them, but there's also some huge upsides, right? So upside number 1 is that information that your opponent cannot realistically account for works out very well in like tournament strategies and in like in climbing situations, right? Basically, it's the reason why Arishem has done historically well and still continues to limp along even in his nerf state, because while your opponent can realistically math out what's going to happen if you're playing like a meta version of a deck, if they have, like you were looking at different sites like Untapped or Snap.fan to see what the latest decks are, and you go, oh yeah, they're playing this 12, you can basically kind of figure out what they're going to do to you, right? Ramatut adds in a little bit of extra randomness to that. They can't account for Ramatut just randomly proccing, I don't know, a Gwenpool ability and giving your hand a bunch of power, right? They can't account for him randomly proccing Shang-Chi and blowing up a card, right? These are things that are not realistic to take into account, which is why it's going to provide some surprise effect on them. The problem is that as far as we can tell, like from data mines and the dev video that we just saw, I don't think Ramatut tells you beforehand what he's going to do. He's just going to be played, and fire off some random stuff. So you, as a player, the controlling Ramatut can't really control what and where like he's going to provide any value. And that's the big con, right? Like when you think of stuff that gives asymmetric information, you're thinking of like Iron Patriot, right? And he gives you a card in your hand, and you know what it is, but your opponent doesn't. You think of stuff like Airsham, where you're drawing random cards, but you see the card you draw, right? Your Kang, which is a great comparison to this because thematically they're the same guy, right? So it's a very cool callback to this character. But with Kang, you draw the card and you see what it is. Ramatut does not appear to do that. So if you're playing him, you're just going to be as surprised as your opponent is. How do we make this better? How do we make this good? Or what would make this exciting? More stats, in my opinion, right? Like 4/5 is very conservative, but that might be what is appropriate considering the power level of the cards that he can like fire off, right? Speaking of data mines, as far as we know, the wording is more flavorful than specifically mechanical. Like it doesn't do every on reveal from like before this card was released, which is what I thought on like the first time I saw this in the data mines. There seems to be some sort of curated list. We don't really have all the details on how it works. There's basically, I believe it's 108 cards that can randomly pull from, and it pulls 3 of them, right? I currently have a graphic on Snap.fan on the data mine article for when this card came out that shows a big list of them all. I plan to make a better one because I look at it and I'm like, well, it's just a bunch of names and it's hard to parse. I think it'll be easier to see when you can see a breakdown by cost, and then you can see like kind of what you're looking for. It's random, so who knows what's going to happen when you play them. I'm interested in the card, like flavorfully, and like as a player, like I'm excited to like, you know, the big times when you drop him down on like a Wong and just watch him fire off like a million times. Like that's going to be cool. Whether it's a good card or not, I don't think it's the same as the randomness that Erisham gave you. So I'm going to actually give this like a 4, but I really wish it was more. Okay, so that's everyone. This is I guess like you call this the test run of like the new paradigm here, right? Like this is Snappy Review was made to be written, and it was made to be, you know, quick paced, and it's like here are my thoughts on the cards as fast as I can go, right? It's going to be a little bit of a different format now that I'm recording it, but we'll see how it kind of evolves that way. Let me know what it is that you want me to focus on with new cards when they come out. What would you rather I talk more about synergies? Would you rather I talk more about, you know, who the character is flavorfully, why you'd want to buy it, that kind of stuff, or I can just kind of babble on about, you know, this is why this card is really strong, right? So anyway, I'll catch you guys later. Thank you very much, and expect to see more content from me coming soon. Thanks.